The Global Interstate System. The world is composed of many states having different forms of government. It has been one of the major subjects of scholars of political disciplines because it is viewed as the institution that sets policies for the country. The study of international relations is becoming more imperative since it is an attempt to explain behavior that occurs across the boundaries of states, the broader relationships of which such behavior is a part, and the institutions, private, state, non-governmental, and intergovernmental, that oversee those interactions. This lesson will begin with a short narration of some events that occurred 400 years ago and the challenges that most governments face amid globalization. It will also tackle the different institutions that govern international relations in order to facilitate connections among nation-states. Objectives. At the end of this lesson, you are expected to 1. Explain the effects of globalization on governments. 2. Identify the institutions that govern international relations. The interstate system. The origins of the present-day concept of sovereignty can be traced back to the Treaty of Westphalia, which was a set of agreements signed in 1648 to end the 30 Years' War between the major continental powers of Europe. The Westphalian system provided stability for the nations of Europe until it faced its major challenge by Napoleon Bonaparte. The latter believed in spreading the principles of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity to the rest of Europe. Despite the challenge of Napoleon to the Westphalian system and the eventual collapse of the concert of Europe after World War I, present-day international system has traces of this history. Effects of globalization to governments. One of the key aspects of state sovereignty is the government. It is a group of people who have the ultimate authority to act on behalf of a state. Each state has its own right to self-determination, and that other country should not intervene in the affairs of that state unless there are extraordinary reasons to do so. Globalization has, in a way, reshaped the role and functions of nation-states as governing bodies in their particular territories. First, globalization is seen to impose a forced choice upon nation-states. Either they conform to the neoliberal ideas and free market principles of deregulation, privatization, and free trade, or run the risk of being left behind in terms of development. Of course, nation-states in this contemporary age are forced to submit themselves to the demands of globally accepted free market principles. Second is the establishment of economic and political integrations. One good example is the European Union, EU, and the North America Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. EU has a single currency and monetary system, parliament with legislative powers, with common citizens' rights to live, work, vote, and run for office. The statehood of the members is not dissolved. What has changed is only how the nation-states function, in terms of economy and politics, as part of a whole. The third effect of globalization is the establishment of international laws and principles. This is observable in the establishment of the UN, that operates as a forum for nation-states to air their differences and try to resolve them. The fourth effect is the rise of transnational activism, TNA. Such happens when activist groups of nation-states connect with their counterparts in other states. For example, an advocacy-based organization in the Philippines may connect itself with and get support from other human rights groups in Europe to pressure the Philippine government to realign its stance and actions in upholding human rights. Institutions that govern international relations. There are several international organizations that governments of countries around the world and individuals participate in. In order to facilitate connections among nation-states, intergovernmental organizations (IGOs) were established. Their aim is to foster strong economic, political, cultural, educational, and technical intergovernmental relationships. There are also non-governmental organizations promoting social and economic growth. Let us look at them one by one. Peace treaties and military alliances. The UN and NATO. Global politics entails relationship of countries and different governments and non-governmental organizations. The United Nations, UN, is one of the leading political organizations in the world where nation-states meet and deliberate. However, it remains as an independent actor in global politics. Generally, it functions in four areas: military issues, economic issues, environmental issues, and human protection. It is made up of close to 200 countries from around the world, 193 member states to be exact. United Nations 2011. Global Economic Associations, the WTO and NAFTA. The next group is an economic association, WTO, which was created with the goal of increasing free trade. Countries, therefore, can buy and sell goods from one another without placing takes on imports or tariffs. In addition, tariffs are used to protect businesses and companies inside their country. Another famous economic organization is NAFTA. This is an economic treaty between the United States, Canada, and Mexico, in which the three countries trade freely without taxing each other. NAFTA is not without critics either. Some American auto workers protested against NAFTA as several car companies moved their factories to Mexico in search for cheaper labor. NAFTA, like WTO, represents the challenge in America of keeping manufacturing factories. European Union, EU, an intergovernmental organization with 28 state members, has its origins in post-World War II. Attempts to integrate European economies and prevent future conflicts was established in 1993. Its goals are to promote peace, its values and well-being of its citizens, offer freedom, security, and justice without internal borders, uphold sustainable development, combat social exclusion and discrimination, promote scientific and technological progress, enhance economic, social, and territorial cohesion among member countries, respect cultural and linguistic diversity, and establish an economic and monetary union. Non-governmental organizations, NGOs. Another example of an international organization that was developed out of war is the Red Cross, Red Crescent in Muslim countries. NGOs are not tied to any country. This allows them to operate freely throughout the world. They provide emergency relief such as food, water, and medical supplies for those whose homes or towns have been destroyed by disaster or war. They also monitor the treatment of prisoner of wars and go to conflicts to make sure that no war crimes are taking place. In fact, the Red Cross began as an organization to help those who were wounded during wars. All right, let's wrap up the discussion on the Global Interstate System. We began by tracing the historical origins of the interstate system back to the Treaty of Westphalia, 1648, which introduced the principle of sovereignty, the right of each state to govern itself without outside interference. Although this system has been challenged many times, such as by Napoleon or the collapse of the Concert of Europe after World War I, it still forms the backbone of today's international order. From there, we examined the effects of globalization on governments. We saw that states face pressure to adopt neoliberal economic principles, such as free trade and deregulation. Regional integrations like the EU and NAFTA reshape how states function economically and politically. International laws and institutions, such as the United Nations, create rules and platforms for cooperation. We then moved to the institutions that govern international relations, where we distinguished between intergovernmental organizations, IGOs, and non-governmental organizations, NGOs, UN and NATO for peace, security, and collective defense, WTO and NAFTA for economic relations and free trade, ASEAN and the EU as examples of regional integration, NGOs like the Red Cross, which operate globally to provide relief and uphold humanitarian principles. The takeaway is this: While sovereignty remains a foundation of the international system, globalization has blurred borders and forced states to cooperate more closely. Nation-states today do not exist in isolation. They are bound by economic ties, legal frameworks, alliances, and even civil society movements that transcend borders.